Austin, Texas is known for being one of the most liberal and progressive cities in America. But it also ranks as the most economically segregated large metro area in the entire country. Economic segregation is a term used for when wealth is concentrated into specific neighborhoods and areas of the city. What you are looking at right now is household income across the city of Austin. The areas that make between $70,000 and $200,000 annually are shown in green. The red displays the areas that make between $5,000 and $70,000 annually. The divider? Interstate Highway 35. After the Civil War, Austin's African American population was mostly spread across small freedmen communities. City leaders wanted them elsewhere. They envisioned a small racial ghetto that would be established on less valuable land, and although a 1917 Supreme Court ruling, Buchanan v. Worley, stated that using local ordinances to enforce racial housing segregation was illegal, Austin looked for ways to circumvent it.
All over the country, and in Austin certainly, there is a doubling down, an increased sense of urgency to separate the races and reestablish white supremacy. So the city council intentionally creates an extra wide road called East Avenue that's hard to cross physically. It's a physical barrier to separate white Austin, which is west of that line, and black and brown Austin, which is east of that line. And back then there were a lot of black and brown communities that line today is I-35, just for context. And it's I-35 because the city council would later ask the federal government to change the plans of I-35, which originally was supposed to go where Mopac is, to strengthen the physical barrier between white and non-white Austin and East Avenue. So there used to be, before the construction of East Avenue, there used to be a lot of communities of color west of that line. West of Lamar was overwhelmingly former slaves and their descendants, if you can imagine that, if you know Austin today. And so they encouraged and coerced and threatened and bullied people to move east of East Avenue. And then if they still didn't, they would refuse to provide them city services, water, electricity, trash, these sorts of things, yeah.
Local government commissioned the consulting firm Koch and Fowler to draft the 1928 Austin City Plan, and within the report, the aim is not hidden. It is our recommendation that the nearest approach to the solution of the race segregation problem will be the recommendation of this district as a Negro district, and that all the facilities and conveniences be provided to the Negroes in this district, as an incentive to draw the Negro population to this area. This will eliminate the necessity of duplication of white and black schools, white and black parks, and other duplicate facilities for this area. The plan also lays out a vision for areas marked for future driveways, including I-35, writing that most of the property which will be needed is at present occupied by very unsightly and unsanitary shacks inhabited by Negroes. With these buildings removed to provide for the trafficway, most of the remaining property will be of a substantial and more desirable type. The construction of this driveway and reclamation of the banks of this creek will make the remaining property very desirable and will increase its value to many times the cost of the acquisition of the necessary property to complete the project.
When I was a kid, I would be told, because I grew up in Southwest Austin, I would be told, don't cross 35, don't go over there. It's bad over there, it's scary, it's dangerous. We were told that, and certainly the idea of moving over there, living over there would have been, difficult for most of the people I grew up with to imagine. And we're talking here back in the 70s, 80s, 90s. But then, of course, people my age and younger begin to think, well, I'm not a racist. I don't think that way. I don't care. In fact, I think it might be cool to live in a diverse neighborhood. They were also attracted to a community where it was a lot of local restaurants, local shops, these sorts of things, which of course is also created by racism, because the reason why you don't have a lot of national chains east of I-35, and you historically haven't even more so, is because insurance, because they won't, it's very pricey or maybe even impossible for like a McDonald's to get insurance over there. And so that became appealing to a later generation, the diversity of the community, the local feel to it. And so I think with the best of intentions, I knew people, we just bought a house, wherever it was, it's Chacon and 4th Street or something. Oh, that's really cool, And they didn't go over there to destroy the community. They didn't see it as a land grab. They saw a cheap piece of property, and they were among the first generations that felt comfortable moving into that sort of neighborhood. Well, the unintended consequence of that is the price gets driven up, And so you have an explosion in property values. Of course, businesses begin to move in at that time, higher end businesses, national chains, as the neighborhood begins to change. The property values go up. And so you now have two types of people of color over there. You have those who owned the property, and I mean, really, there's cases where a house is worth $12,000, and then 10 years later, it's worth $400,000 or $500,000, which is crazy. And on the one hand, you can say that's great, what a windfall for them. But of course, we live in a property tax-based state, and so when the value of the home explodes like that, the property tax explodes along with it. And you get a lot of these are in many cases going to be older folks, maybe living on fixed income retirements, or even if they're working folks, they can't possibly pay these taxes. So sure, they get a one-time windfall if they own the home, but now they're displaced. And they move out to places like Kyle, where I used to live, or Maine, or the area around Runberg, Rutland 35, right, where it's cheaper because they can no longer afford to live in a place where they might have been for generations. But even worse is the renters who don't get the windfall. They just watch their rent steadily increase beyond the point where they can pay, and now they're pushed out to go rent in some other community further away from downtown. In a weird way, racism had, and it's a terrible thing to say, but it had kind of protected these communities. It had kind of created this force field around them, this shell. So these folks were able to live downtown with easy access to some of the downtown jobs and things like that, and they were shielded from being pushed out of that by racism. And once racism began to wane, and I certainly don't mean to say it went away, but once it began to wane a little bit, that protection collapsed. And then you see what we have now, which is gentrification, which I think largely comes from a place of good, but has certainly had significant negative consequences. So I think it's a more complicated issue to deal with.